Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you and welcome back to day 5, our last day, our final day of Clean Water Fest 2020. Our first ever virtual Clean Water Fest has been a great week, and we appreciate you joining us today. Those of you who are just joining us here on YouTube or just joining us on cleanwaterfest.com, we welcome your comments and participation. You can hashtag along with us, hashtag Clean Water Fest, Twitter. You can join us at NEORSD. We have a great day, great final day broadcast to bring to you here today. Let's take a look back. So this week we have covered a lot of ground. Monday, day 1 was all about the urban water cycle. Day 2 was all about tours. Tours Tuesday, we took you into our southerly treatment plant and also our laboratory for day 2. Day 3 was a tunnels, trucks, and tools extravaganza. We got a chance to hear from our sewer maintenance team. We had a chance to talk about all of our construction projects with Project Clean Lake. A lot was shared in that conversation. That took us to day 4. Yesterday was a big focus on our laboratory, but with a little bit of a fun twist. And that was with our Clean Water Kids Day, talking to Pete Reedish and Adam Beaker, as well as our outreach team, Jessica and Ebony. We're back to show you some of the work that goes on in classrooms and how you can get involved virtually if you're interested in having them work with our classrooms and your classrooms here in the future. That brings us to day 5. Today is a field day Friday. We're going to go out into the field with a couple teams of ours, and it's really a stream theme. This is not a Netflix streaming. This is not a YouTube streaming. This is a real life out in the environment streaming. We're going to take a look at the work that we do in streams and around streams to protect water quality and how it contributes to our work here at the Regional Sewer District. So we are looking forward to sharing 3 feature videos with you. We also are going to be speaking to 5 experts as we go through these 3 videos. We're looking forward to that conversation with them. I'll introduce each of them as the broadcast goes along. So we're going to kick things off with a watersheds video, specifically talking about stream restoration. What the heck is stream restoration? That's what Kim is going to show you with Janet. They're going to go through some of the work that goes on with our stream restoration projects. And Donna will also be on screen to walk you through a couple examples of the stream restoration work that we have done to bring streams back to health with natural solutions, nature-based solutions. We're excited to kick that off. So stay tuned, and we are going to bring you those videos for today. Getting things queued up, and we are good to go.
Hi, my name is Kim Kolish. I'm the manager of stormwater design at the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. Today we're at the site of our Big Creek project. This project was basically completed to fix a large drop structure that was in Big Creek. This drop structure was constructed originally when they constructed I-71. Because that drop structure was failing, it was about a 30-foot high concrete drop structure. We came in here and filled the structure with large rocks. And by doing so, we stabilized the area to prevent any additional erosion and failure of that drop structure within Big Creek.
We're on a section of Big Creek in Parma Heights, and this is a section that was experiencing severe erosion of the banks and into a manhole. Raised the grade of the stream up, moved the manhole out of the way, and reconnected the bank, at least reconnected the stream to some of its floodplain where we could do that. We revegetated the slopes, planted trees, and overall just restored this section of stream and stabilized it.
Hello, my name is Donna Friedman. I'm the watershed team leader for Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. And today we are at the Stickney Creek restoration site here in Brooklyn, Ohio. Originally, there was a very large intercommunity sewer that ran right next to our stream here. The sewer and the stream were right up against each other. Stream water would get into the sewer and sewer water would get into the stream, which was a very large water quality hazard. So the project that we did involved moving the sewer away from the stream. The stream was moved closer to the taller trees that you see in the background. And we did a floodplain expansion to reduce the amount of overland flooding of Ridge Road. The stream has a meandering pattern, which it did not have before. Meanders are the kind of the wiggle in the stream. It helps slow down the water, and so it reduces the velocity and it reduces the likelihood of erosion. in the future when you have large storms that blow through. Yeah, it looks pretty good, for sure.
So Donna really said the thing that stuck out to me when we were going through that video was Donna's explanation of the meandering as the wiggle in the stream. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those nature and natural aspects of stormwater management with one of our experts here, Kim Kolich, who was the first face you saw in that video. And she is a manager of stormwater design. Kim, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
So we're joined with you live in person now as following that video feature. So I want you to start by explaining to folks who are watching today. We talk about stream restoration as a function of stormwater management. I know it's much more than that, but when it comes to stormwater management, what is that? How do you define that for people who are watching?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, stormwater management is the way we deal with runoff that happens from precipitation events. And if you think about it, you might ask the question, first of all, well, why do we need it? Hasn't it always been raining and snowing and everything else? And that's true. But the things that have changed is that we've changed the landscape of these watersheds. We have eliminated natural wetlands that used to be there that help store and infiltrate and treat some of the runoff. We've increased impervious surfaces that don't allow for that slowdown of the water, infiltration of the stormwater, or treatment of that stormwater through infiltration. So now we're pushing water faster, higher volume, and with lower water quality into our streams in the region. So we need that management to kind of deal with those decades-long issues.
So as those problems have accumulated over time, a lot of that is because of our own development decisions, not us as an organization necessarily, but us as humans, as people, and the way that the society has been built up over time. What it looks like in these in the video clips, and we'll also have a couple images here on screen in a moment, it looks like we're trying to restore the natural look and feel and the natural function of streams to restore them to what they should be. And can you say a little bit more about that? Is that what we're trying to do in these projects?
Yeah, and a lot of the projects, at least one of the projects you saw in that video, and then a couple more will show, is where we have the opportunity to expand the floodplain on these stream restorations. That's fantastic, right? So I think the first one we'll show here is a project we did at on Beecher's Brook, which is in the village of Mayfield Village. And this kind of shows a before and after. You can see the homes back there, but we had a highly erosive stream incised. It was continuing to lower its elevation and then start to erode the banks on each side. And so what we did here was we raised the stream bed up a little bit, and then we flattened out the floodplain to allow that stream to access its floodplain, which allows for some storage within the watershed. It slows down those flows, those erosive forces, and then it creates a much better nature-based solution and has an ecological lift for that section of stream.
So we got a couple more here I wanted to also get your feedback on. Let's take a look at this. This next image here is one that I think is worth talking about, so I appreciate your patience. Stickney Creek, Donna talked a bit about that. What are we looking at here? Yeah,
so this was what you saw in the video, and you said, that doesn't look like the video, does it? But this is exactly what Stickney, one of the things that Stickney is designed to do is to store that water. We expanded that floodplain to allow the water to fill up in this area. And this was after the storm, I think it was a Friday, August 28th, where we had significant rainfall. So this is what it's supposed to do. And then if you go to the next slide, just not 1-2 hours later, this is what it looks like. Again, a little bit more of what you saw in Donna's video, but it's still, it's still accessing that low floodplain there and continues to help treat the water, slow down the water, and reduce problems downstream.
And this has a great view up in the upper half of that picture of that meandering, that wiggling that is the natural function of a stream. That's how things should look in so many communities, as I'm sure you see and document in our problem assessment, is so many streams are just channelized, or just straight lines over years of development that have affected how they naturally flow. But this is the way things are supposed to be.
Right, and so, that wiggle we talk about, the meanders, it lengthens the stream. And when you lengthen the stream, what you're also doing is reducing the slope. So you're allowing that access, that little bit of slowdown and access into that floodplain.
And so in problem areas like this, this is a great example of what happens over time and the damage that can be done if streams are not properly managed. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this is a bank failure on West Creek in the city of Parma. And, you know, while we try as much as we can to have those nature-based solutions on our stream restoration, sometimes you just don't have the space or the room to be able to do it. Yep. So in this project, what we ended up having to do was install a soldier pile wall, which is on the next slide, to really just harden and reinforce that bank so that the erosion doesn't continue towards what is behind there, which is a nursing home facility. So, you know, sometimes we have to harden these streams in order to fix some of the erosion problems, but our first option is always those nature-based solutions and increasing that floodplain around these stream systems.
It's very much related, though, to the conversation we've had in past days. We talked a lot about Project Clean Lake on Wednesday, and the reality is that gray infrastructure, that like what we're seeing on screen here, and green infrastructure that we've been talking about in past dialogues as well, they can work together, and they work together well when done strategically. And this is an example of how you can really bring both of those together in a good way, correct?
Absolutely, and we have some projects that have a combination of both, right? So we're always looking to add those nature-based solutions, even if we know we need a hardened or gray solution for some of these problems.
Yeah, so it's about knowing what options are on the table and really being open to what's best for both the environment and the customers in that area, and ultimately in the region. I think it's a good transition to bring up our next video feature, which is going to bring several faces to the screen to talk about what stormwater management looks like from an inspection side, because these projects that Kim has just talked about need to be maintained, they need to be monitored, and they need to be kept functioning properly. And so our stormwater inspection and maintenance team is one of the groups who help to make sure that those are functioning properly. So with our next video feature, you'll see several faces, and we'll be followed up with an interview adding to our panel to talk with Kim and myself. Nikki and Kelsey will be joining us to talk about the work that they're doing in stormwater management and the stormwater inspection team specifically. So let's bring up our next video feature coming at you right now.
I'm Ann Roberto. I'm a stormwater inspector in the Stormwater Inspection and Maintenance Department, otherwise known as SWIM. I'm out here as the lead inspector at our green infrastructure sites. Green infrastructure incorporates plants, soils, and things like permeable pavement, which allow water to infiltrate into the ground, reducing pollutants that go out to our lake. When we allow stormwater to enter our green infrastructure sites, it's taking that water that would be running off from the road into our storm sewers and overwhelming our combined sewer systems, and lets that water infiltrate into the ground versus going into the system. The water comes in from the storm sewers and it passes through here first, and there's a basket that catches trash and floatables, and then the water passes through a pipe that leads to the green infrastructure. The water then comes through and out through this opening in the retaining wall, and the water's energy is dissipated along this concrete channel through a series of boulders, so the water slows down, and then it enters into this upper basin where there are notches in the concrete, allowing the water to enter the site and infiltrate down into the ground.
Day-to-day take care of this facility here. One of the things we do, we keep up the aesthetics. We clean some of the mulch beds, make sure the weeds are out, make sure everything's functional when it comes to the water infiltration into the ground.
a stormwater inspection and maintenance paraprofessional intern here at the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. We're at UCI Marriott, which is one of our green infrastructure sites that utilizes permeable pavers in order to help decrease the amount of pollutants and the quantity of water that enters into our stormwater system. The way these permeable pavers work is that they allow stormwater that's collected from these rooftops to come down and infiltrate into these underground tanks that slowly leach the water back into the system instead of just one big influx of water that rushes right into our sewers, causing any sort of problems, overflows, or issues like that. It comes in here, permeates through these pavers, and slowly enters back into the system.
So Ann gave us a great definition of kind of what green infrastructure is. I want to be able to bring on a few more experts, as I mentioned, Nikki Velez and Kelsey Amadon. You may know both of them if you follow our social media, specifically at NEORSD on Twitter. They send me a lot of great photographs from the field, and I love to make it possible for them to share their story visually, so you can really have an understanding of what this work looks like in your neighborhoods, in your backyards, in your region. Some of the images that you see right there behind Kelsey and the images behind Kim as well, these are our projects in your areas that you can really see functioning and functioning well. So Kelsey, I'm glad you joined us. I know Nikki will be here in a moment. Tell me a bit about the work you do, Kelsey, and how you what the work is in the stormwater as a stormwater inspector.
Hey, John, thanks for having us.
Good to have you.
As John said, me and Nikki, who has just joined us, are both stormwater inspectors. So we go out into the field, we look at the streams, we look at culverts, crossings, and green infrastructure. We look for the structural components of it. So is it functioning properly? Does it look like it might fail soon? After the big storms like we've just had, often we're out looking for debris and looking for evidence of what sort of flooding had occurred, and just kind of keeping an eye on the whole system to see how it's doing.
I think it's a good summary, and we could talk for quite a while on just the work that stormwater inspectors have to do. Let me go a little bit back to what Ann was talking about. She said laid out a definition of green infrastructure. How would you define green infrastructure, Kelsey?
So green infrastructure, it's a method of stormwater control, and so it focuses on storing, filtering, infiltrating, or harvesting or reusing stormwater. Mm-hmm. And that gives us the ability to increase the resiliency of our infrastructure. So it reduces that stress on the collection system. So they call it green infrastructure because it tends to use plants or soils, sometimes other structures as well, that lets that water infiltrate into the ground and reduce those flows. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it'll kind of just temporarily store the flow so that it enters the system slower. It also has a tendency to, it'll reduce contaminants as well as sediment and keeps that out of the streams and out of the stormwater system. And then also has other co-benefits that happen to go along with it. So there's also habitat for pollinators. We tend to plant a lot of native plants in these, as well as a nice green space for neighborhoods. So improving neighborhood connectivity and giving people a place to go and see these structures.
It's a long list of benefits and a long list of ways in which we have to care for those systems to make sure they're functioning properly. Before I move to Nikki, let me ask Kim and Kelsey a question, because we've talked about, we're kind of looking at things through a stormwater management lens today, and our regional stormwater management program has a significant focus on stream restoration. But these benefits you're talking about, Kelsey, and what you were talking about earlier, Kim, also relate to Project Clean Lake, don't they? What's the relationship between this type of work that we're focusing on today in stormwater and how it relates to Project Clean Lake, our combined sewer overflow control efforts?
All right, I guess I'll jump in first. And, some of the projects that you just saw on the green infrastructure video there are actually part of our consent decree with US EPA on mitigating for CSO volume. So, those green infrastructure projects are reducing the amount of combined sewer overflow that's going to our waterways. So that's how it's related. And it's a great way to kind of showcase what green infrastructure can do, not only for combined sewer overflows, but the other co-benefits that Kelsey talked about.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Kelsey?
No, that pretty much sums it up. It's just trying to reduce those flows. And then when you reduce that flow, especially in the combined system, then you're going to have less combined sewer overflows, which is required by our consent decree with Ohio EPA.
So Nikki, thank you for joining us, Nikki. These types of projects take a lot of care and maintenance. And what are some of the challenges to managing green infrastructure? It's not as if it's just a pipe in the ground needs to be cleaned and taken care of, with a preventative maintenance schedule. Green infrastructure takes maintenance too. Can you tell us a little bit about what that might include?
Yeah, certainly, John. Hi there. Maintaining these sites is certainly challenging, and it takes a lot of hands-on TLC. Each site has its own challenge, but all of them need weekly landscaping, weeding, trash removal, and sediment removal. Fortunately, we have a terrific green infrastructure crew who handles a large chunk of that work. As you saw, Thomas is one of our staff members earlier in the video. And so anyway, in addition to having that crew, we also do contract some specialty items out, but we want to maintain a native landscape like Kelsey had mentioned. So therefore we have to tackle any invasives that enter into our GI sites. And this can be, time consuming and expensive. And we also do some street cleaning, and that's to prevent sediment and gravel from entering into our stormwater control measures. And in addition to having a crew out, the green infrastructure worker crew out on a weekly basis, our stormwater inspectors, like you saw Ann Roberto earlier in the video, and Lauren and Kelsey and myself, we have to go out to each site on a monthly basis and after rain events to ensure that the green infrastructure features are functioning properly, and then report if any additional maintenance is needed at each site. And there's a wide variety of what is needed at each one. So yeah, it can be challenging. It's quite time consuming. And like I mentioned, each site needs a lot of TLC.
And that's a good way to put it. I think if you are just tuning in today and haven't seen the rest of our clips from the past few days, I encourage you to go back to cleanwaterfest.com and catch up on those clips, because you do see a lot of the variety of skills and talents that are necessary that Nikki is mentioning to care for the systems that are at work. As I mentioned, both Kelsey and Nikki do fortunately send me a lot of images that help to tell the story of what our work looks like in the community. And so as I get a chance in my role to share those stories on social, it's a great representation of the variety of ways in which we are present in your communities. So Nikki, I remember this is an image that you sent me of the stormwater inspection team out on the job in the community. You're out there every day.
We're out there all the time, every day. That's Kelsey in the middle. And on this specific day, we're entering into a confined space, culverted stream in Cleveland's west side. And so we took a large crew because there are 2 barrels within that culverted stream. So we split up when we entered in, and that's our supervisor over there on the side with the clipboard.
Yeah. And you're out there at all times of year. We'll come back to this question a little bit later, but there's not necessarily an off day, an off season for stormwater inspection work, is there?
No, not at all. And as you can see here, I'm the only one wearing snow pants. I am a freeze baby. But in this picture, we are in Parma, and we're actually doing a stream bank stabilization. Oh wait, actually, I think this one's Mill Creek. Kelsey wasn't there this day. Anyway, this one was quite a while ago, but we're installing bank pins along the banks, so then we can therefore measure the erosion rate that's taking place within that stream.
And both of you have been sending me stream selfies quite a bit. So this is one of my favorites from more recently. The inspection work takes a lot of different forms, and this was one of the nicer days we've had in recent history.
Yeah, this one was in the Rocky River watershed at the confluence, and yeah, beautiful day, social distancing. We got our masks on, and the work doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't. I think, and I do want to take that then to transition to our final feature and bring on 2 more experts here to talk a little bit more about water quality. So these inspectors from stormwater are making sure that the stream is functioning properly, but how do we know the stream is healthy? We have a water quality team who is out there every day, similar to our swim members, to make sure that the stream health is what it needs to be and our work is contributing to improving the health and managing it properly. So I'm going to bring you this next video featuring our water quality and industrial surveillance team. So stay tuned, and we will be back with 2 more experts following this segment.
What we're really trying to do is figure out if streams are meeting the goals that Ohio EPA has set for them in terms of them being fishable and swimmable. So we go out there and look at the biological communities, and the health of those communities tells us whether or not it's meeting those goals.
Today we're out doing our water chemistry and our macroinvertebrate sampling. We run a lot of different tests, so we need a lot of different bottles for the lab to break down each analysis and be able to run all of our tests. So we have a bunch of bottles here. Some will get filtered, some will not. It depends on the analysis and what the lab needs. So this is our XO1 sonde. This gives all our field parameters such as temperature, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, which is used for a real-time reading while we're in the field. Now the macroinvertebrate work, this is our Hester Dendy sampler. We're installing this today. It's going to be in for a period of 6 weeks. And the spaces in between these blocks are designed to have macroinvertebrates or aquatic bugs inhabit them. So after 6 weeks, we'll count the bugs that are in here, identify them by species and tolerance, and that'll give us an overall score of what the macroinvertebrate community is in the stream.
Pollution-tolerant fish can kind of live anywhere. They can live where it's low dissolved oxygen. There could be other things, bad things in the water, and they don't really care. Other fish, they need really clean water to live, and that's obviously what we want to see more of. Back when we first started sampling in the late 80s, early 90s, we didn't get a lot of species, or maybe like a dozen, and they were all pollution-tolerant. Within the past, 10 years, we've collected over 70 different species in the river, and some of them are actually pollution intolerant now.
So Justin and Seth gave us a good perspective for just a small glimpse of what water quality and industrial surveillance works on and how they're present in the stream community. And so I'm going to bring on 2 additional panelists. Justin is one of them, and as well as John Rhodes, who is our manager of WQIS. Justin and John, I'm glad to have you here. I'll give you a second here to get your cameras up and running. Our water quality and industrial surveillance team is not just in the streams, they also do industrial monitoring. And I want to be able to allow each of them to speak a bit about that. And then also tie it back into what we've heard so far with our watersheds work. How are our investigators on our water quality side working closely with our stormwater team, our watersheds team, to make sure our streams are what they need to be when it comes to their health. John, I'm glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I want to be able to,
John.
I want to be able to, that's all right. You're all good. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. Minor technical issues we're dealing with them just fine on our end. I want to be able to bring up a couple images to give a bit of a broader understanding of what water quality industrial surveillance, what the department focuses on and what they work with. And so I wanted to be able to bring up a couple images and have you or Justin kind of give us a broader perspective on what the department works on and how it fits into the work that has been touched on so far in our presentation here today. John, tell us a bit more about WQIS.
All right, John, thanks for having me on. As you know, the name depicts WQIS department on the environmental side and the industrial monitoring side. So the water quality for the environmental and the industrial for our industrial section. So on the environmental side, we conduct sampling and monitoring of the streams, rivers, and nearshore Lake Erie. And what we monitor for includes water chemistry, bacteriological sampling, we do electrofishing surveys, benthic macroinvertebrate sampling, and also stream habitat assessments. So during our field season, we collect all this data from a number of sites throughout our service area. And then at the end of the season, we'll compile that data and then interpret it and determine what the status of the water quality is based on those sections of streams that we monitored or Lake Erie. And we'll compare those to Ohio EPA's standards to see if those sections of rivers are meeting their use designations.
Yep. And so we're just keeping up with making sure we're meeting those standards that are so critical. So the image we see on screen right now is electroshocking fish.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So what they're doing there is, oops. Okay.
Yeah, my bad.
Okay, no problem. We can move on.
Well, I think this is a matter of the fish sampling to make sure that the fish health is what it needs to be, and we can talk more about that with any questions. What are we looking at in this picture here?
Okay, so we have also kind of like on the environmental side is our pollution program, pollution prevention program, where we have our illicit discharge detection and elimination group that goes out and look at stormwater, dry weather flows that are going through the storm sewer system and entering into a water body of some sort. So they'll go out there, they'll collect samples, they'll do dye tracing to determine what the source of environmental disruption is that may be harmful to the aquatic life that are living downstream in the waterways from where these outfalls are discharging.
And so the next picture we have here, this is not a stream's normal condition. This is one I love to tweet about because people like to talk about our dye work. But what are we looking at here?
So I don't remember this problem specifically, but anyways, they wanted to felt that they found the source. So in order to figure out whether or not that source was entering the stream through that outfall, they conducted a dye test. Or if we find a potential residential or industrial facility that may have an illicit discharge to the sewer system, we can verify through a dye test to determine whether or not their effluent flows are going to the correct place, whether it's sanitary sewer, which would be the place that we'd want it to be going, or if it's going to the storm sewer. So if it's entering through the storm sewer and we verified where it's coming from, we'll work with, our member communities, whatever municipality that's in, to help get this problem remediated and those flows taken out of our surface waters to the environment.
And when these dyes are used, this is an eco-friendly dye. This is not a hazardous material that we're dumping in to trace. This is an eco-friendly product that is safe for the environment, correct?
That's correct. And, we'll get a lot of calls if, there's a dye test going on and maybe we didn't do it. Maybe it was a consultant that was working for us, and a lot of residents, they're pretty observant out there, and they'll call in and say, hey, there's antifreeze coming in, to the stream, this and that, and which it does kind of look like.
It does.
And then we'll go out just to verify to make sure that it's not. And we can usually tell by looking at the colors whether or not it's dye. And dye comes in a number of different colors. It comes blue, red, yellow, green. We try to stay with the yellow green color, because it kind of matches the stream stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think I want to transition then to another aspect of the industrial surveillance, the work that goes on in industries to make sure that companies who work in our region are using the system properly, correct?
Yep. The IS, which is, our industrial side, we have our industrial pretreatment business and mercury programs, and we're responsible for complying with all our MPDS permit requirements. And these programs conduct annual sampling and monitoring of significant, non-significant industrial users. industrial surcharge companies, dentists, and hospitals. So by controlling their discharges and going out there and sampling, and what I mean by that is making sure that their discharges to the collection system are meeting the state, local, and federal regulations to make sure that they're compliant. So we provide, you know, the plant support to our 3 wastewater treatment facilities. So we regulate them so that, because we're regulated by Ohio EPA and our effluent limits. So by us regulating the industrial community, we can ensure that our plants effluent discharges are most likely going to meet the permanent limits set by Ohio EPA.
And that makes sense. So we need to know what they're putting in the sewers because it certainly either affects the environment or it affects our treatment process. And so we have to keep tabs on what people are putting down into the drains. Justin, if you can turn your camera on, I want to give you a second to follow up on some of what John's talked about and perhaps add some perspective on how WQIS is contributing to the work of the other departments that have been showcased here today. Justin, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you. My video just doesn't want to start up, but we could just go on with the audio.
All right, well that'll be fine. We've got your face on the feature video clip, so we can we'll bring a still up for the future if we need to.
Right here's Justin. If you can, he's on the back corner of the boat, and
he's the one pushing the boat along behind you guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're here with us, Justin. I appreciate you joining us and taking the time. How can you give us a bit of perspective on how WQIS is involved in the stream projects that we've seen here in this featured content today?
Yeah. Thanks for having us, John. Most of the work in WQIS and the environmental assessment group, we'll go out and assess our stormwater projects pre and post monitoring. So besides looking at the erosion, the flooding control, we're looking at what the aquatic life is, what the water chemistry is, and if our stormwater projects are making a benefit to both the water quality and the aquatic life in there. You know, these projects are designed to have both the stormwater quantity and a quality benefit to them. So we're the water quality portion of that. For example, we saw Donna come on with Stickney Creek earlier. And during high flows, that was getting a mixture of sanitary sewage into the stream. So we documented that. We were out there in 2017, had high E. coli concentrations pre-monitoring. That project just finished up, so we'll get back out there, do some post-monitoring to see if there's any issues left in the stream there. I shared a couple pictures with you. Yeah. One of them, we're out at Shaker Lakes, which when that lake was built, it used to have 10 or 12 feet of water in it. When you have a dam there, that'll block the stream, settle out the solids, and it'll accumulate. So over the years, this accumulation of sediment has to be removed. So we'll be out there, we have Joe here, sampling down to a depth of, I think, 8 or 9 foot of sediment to determine what we can use that for. Can we use it for a beneficial reuse? Do we have to landfill it? So this analysis will tell us where we can take that sediment. We also do mussel surveys, which I sent you a good picture of that. Mm-hmm. So we're out at Baldwin Creek here. Every time we do a stormwater restoration project, we will do a mussel survey just to see if there's any mussels present. And if there is, then we'll move on to stage 2. This is the stage 2 where we found mussels in Baldwin Creek in North Royalton. We ended up relocating those mussels to a different section of stream so we could continue with the project. That was a sediment removal there. In WQS, we also have a district drone program. A lot of the pictures we've seen this week, we've taken through the district drone program.
Very true.
We use the program for photography, video. We can actually make maps by stitching a bunch of pictures together and use georeferencing to determine how bad is the erosion, what are the erosion rates, how much has sediment accumulated in a basin, and that gives our swim department, our engineering and construction department, a good estimate of what they can build a project for to their contractors.
I appreciate you bringing that up because those drone pictures really do add something for the perspective to give our viewers a better idea of how large our projects are and kind of how we are tracking and monitoring their progress. As it relates to mussel surveys, I conduct a mussel survey every time I work out, and I'm still trying to improve those conditions. But as it relates to the work that we've talked about so far today, I want to kind of take a little bit of a circle back. Let me ask you a question about how many monitoring sites we have. How many sites do we monitor in the environment, either Justin or John, in our water quality work. And I want to kind of follow up and see how that relates to our green infrastructure sites, kind of what that number is and how we go about those monitoring efforts.
Well, this year, we're looking at, we're doing about 33 environmental monitoring sites. So on an annual basis from season to season, they could range anywhere from 30 to 45 sites, depending on what type of projects we have planned. I believe this year, and Justin, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we're working on 6 stormwater sites. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Very good. I'm glad you brought that up then. So Nikki or Kelsey, can you talk about how many, approximately how many projects you're working on right now, how many sites we are trying to keeping tabs on?
I know we have 14 green infrastructure sites within Cleveland, but as far as monitoring our post-construction stormwater projects, such as Colombo Park, which was shown in the first video with Janet, and Stickney Creek, which you talked about with Donna Friedman. So those sites have just really been completed in the past year, along with John Nagy in Brookside Reservation. And we inspect those basically after every heavy rain event, because we want to make sure that the sites are still functioning properly and make sure that all the features are still adequately in place and functioning. So then after that, then we'll report any maintenance needed. And then we also will inspect them either on a 6-month period or an annual basis, depending on how much frequency we feel is needed, depending on which site.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so let me transition to Kim and ask a question that I pointed to Nikki and Kelsey talking about the fact that our swim team is out in all seasons. Our work in a construction side, how does it vary from season to season? Can you give us some perspective on how our projects will vary based on the season? Is one season a little bit heavier for construction than others?
Yeah, I mean, we're year round as well. We have a lot of seasonal constraints on our projects due to environmental concerns, right? So there are times when we can't fell trees. There are times when, you know, we need to get a waiver from ODNR if we want to do in-stream work, or we get a waiver for that. So, you know, we really look at the seasonality of our work and just make sure that when we put a project out for a bid for construction, we look at what are those constraints that we need to tell the contractors to be aware of. So not only ones I just mentioned, but also, you know, sometimes we have dormant materials that have to be installed in these stream banks, and we have to be cognizant of when during the year that they can be installed. So it's more about certain restrictions on certain types of work for our projects, but really we're out there constructing all year round.
And so John and Justin, do the seasons affect the work of WQIS? I assume the industrial surveillance work goes on year round. What about the water quality work? How do the seasons affect the work that you do out in the environment?
Well, the environmental assessment side, the monitoring there begins. We normally begin in May doing our beach sampling. But then once we get into the biological field season, that starts on June 15th and it'll run through October 31st.
Okay.
So, you know, and a lot of that's weather dependent on, you know, getting our electrofishing surveys in, getting the Hester Dendy's installed. If you have high flows, we can't get in there to do that work. So we're on a pretty tight timeline, and so we got to take advantage of, you know, the dry weather conditions when we have them and get out there to get these surveys done. But those run, you know, from June 15th to October 31st. And then on the industrial side, it's year round, but we focus heavy early January through, you know, the first 3 or 4 months to try to get as many of those companies done. And they have to annually monitor, I think, right around 170 significant industrial users. And then on the pollution prevention side, they have to look at the dental offices. Even though we don't do much sampling with those, there's 350 approximately that we have to go and look at to make sure they're getting their paperwork filled out and that. And we also monitor the 13 hospitals within our our area here. So that's year round. And one thing I'd also like to touch base is that our crews, we have an on-call crew, you know, where we have to respond to emergencies that come in on a 24/7 basis for the entire year. So most of the ones that we see are odor complaints, maybe from a residential facility or spills of some sort, or if something's coming into one of our wastewater treatment plants that may have an impact on it. We're there to try to trace back and figure out what's going on with that. And roughly each year we respond to, I'd say, between 80 and 100 of those responses every year. And, you know, they could be during working hours or they could be at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we get a crew out there to try to figure out what's going on.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we have a storm response team who also goes out following heavy storms like those that we had this week. If you're watching live, again, I'll reference Monday was a very heavy storm day here in the Cleveland area. So our stormwater team was out in full force following that. Kelsey, let me ask you a question about that. I know that there's the seasonal rain certainly will affect how streams function. I've seen a lot of pictures from you in our social media activities where debris buildup tends to be a big problem in certain areas, and we try to do some preventative work to avoid that. But is there a specific season where debris issues tend to focus on the calendar year, or are they also spread out throughout the spring and summer?
They tend to just be spread out. Whenever it is that we get a big rain that washes that debris downstream, and that can happen anytime. I know we tend to notice a lot in the spring, but that's just because that's when it tends to rain more. But I mean, we can get a big rainstorm in January that can still push just as much debris downstream as any other time of the year. So it really just depends on what's happening day to day with the weather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Kelsey's saying there, because we've had to utilize their group in the past. We have 7 sites on the Cuyahoga River that we do electrofishing on, and a lot of times we'll come across where we can't get the boat through this and that. So we do a lot of pre-scouting before the season starts. And if we have some buildups, then we utilize their talents to get a contractor out there to get it cleared so that we're able to get our work done during the summer.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So in terms of, we've mentioned electrofishing a couple times. We didn't focus much on that in this clip today. But if you go to cleanwaterfest.com and go to our day 5 content, you'll see a couple of video features that we have done in the past on electrofishing. You can get caught up and understand a little bit more about that process. And all of our featured videos from this week, including today's, following this broadcast, will be captured on our cleanwaterfest.com website. So you can check out just those individual features or rewatch this entire conversation. And I'm hoping you have had a chance to look at some of our past broadcasts and see how all these pieces fit together. I want to thank our guests for today's panel, Kim, Nikki, John, Justin, and Kelsey, for taking some of the questions that we have received and just kind of sharing your answers and your perspective about what that relationship is between our environment, our water quality efforts, stormwater, and our efforts to make sure we are doing our best to protect the environment in all aspects of our work. So I want to thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for having us, John.
Thanks, John.
So with that, I want to take a moment to wrap up our day's broadcast and wrap up our week's worth of content. It's been a busy week here on cleanwaterfest.com. It's been a fun time on cleanwaterfest.com, and I want to thank everyone who has joined us at some point of the week, whether it's been just to get started with the week or just joining on right now and tuning in for the first time. The good thing is that all of this content, all of our conversations will be captured and are being captured on cleanwaterfest.com. We're all hoping that Clean Water Fest comes back in full force in person in the next year. We're looking forward to those times we can get together and have that face-to-face interaction. We hope that this has been a good way to have that conversation with you and provide you with a bit of perspective on a variety of days' themes about the work that goes on that you may never think about. We started with the urban water cycle and helped you understand where you fit in that, and ultimately understand where we fit in that and how we can work together to protect our water resources. So I like to say, and if you were on Twitter earlier today, recognize that you don't have to be sad that Clean Water Fest is over. You can be happy and smile in the fact that cleanwaterfest.com happened at all. We're glad that you were a part of the week's broadcast. Again, I'm John G. at NEORSD. Follow us on Twitter at NEORSD. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on LinkedIn. Join us on YouTube. We hope you've had a great week of broadcast. We're looking forward to getting together again Let us know what you think. Share your comments and give us some feedback so we know if this has been helpful for you, and if we look forward to sharing these opportunities again in the future. It's been great. It's been fun. I'm John. You are not, and that's okay. But we're glad to have you here, and thank you very much for joining us all week long. Have a great week. Check out our content, cleanwaterfest.com anytime. I'm with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, and thank you again.